Hello, welcome again to Climate Connect Nigeria podcast. Here we talk about climate change and the intersection of climate change and what people are doing to address issues of climate change. And just like we told you the other time, we are on a series about COP29. And today we'll be dealing with climate change laws and damages and the unseen burden on women as we get towards COP29. What are those things and how do we address these issues? And so with me on today's edition of the podcast, I have Mrs. Sarah Jackson, the Executive Director of Against All Odds Foundation. So join me, let's get to hear what Ms. Sarah Jackson has to say as to the ways of curbing so many issues around climate change and gender as we head to COP29. All right, welcome to Climate Connect podcast, Ms. Sarah Jackson.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's our pleasure to have you here.
Yeah.
So talk to us about what you do at Against All Odds Foundation.
Yeah, Against All Odds Foundation is a national NGO. We are based in Adamawa State, which is our headquarters, but we work through down to the Bay States, the Northeast, and also we spread across other states in the Federation. So basically what we do is a women-led organization.
Okay.
That is founded and led by women. And basically what we do, we respond to both humanitarian and development interventions that cut across health and nutrition, also cut across protection, gender-based violence, and food security and livelihood support. We also engage in climate action. Yeah.
All right. So how does climate-related disasters affect women in terms of livelihood, social status, and mental health?
It is disproportionate. Why? Because climate change itself, the effect of climate change is a threat, not just to women, to the environment and to the entire population. But when we talk about women, women's impact or effect is more. And so when it comes to the aspect of their health, climate change impacts them in a variety of ways. I would say if they are being displaced if people are displaced in a community, for example, women face more of the burden. Why? Because it affects their health. In most cases, it's discovered that during displacement, they actually go to an insecure location. So when they go to an insecure location, and sometimes they may not be able to have access to health services immediately, most especially if they are pregnant women among them, that really affects them. They will not be able to have access to health services. They will not be able to have access to some medicines, even though some of them, while fleeing or while relocating, for example, they tend to forget their medicines and it affects them, like some that use contraceptives and the rest, it used to affect their health. And also the experience, the devastating experience at that moment of that disaster normally have a ripple effect on their psychology. They also have psychological effects. Some of them have depression based on what they have experienced. Most of them also, because of the burden of what they bear in the family, that is why they will have depression. Some of them will go through traumatic experiences. Some of them are emotionally demoralized. So these are some of the health challenges. In terms of their livelihood, of course, when climate change occurs, we know that it affects majorly agricultural productivity. So, and like in this part of the world, for example, our women are majorly into agricultural production. So, and when there is any climate change happening or effect of climate change, it actually destroys their farmlands, and as a result, there will be no enough produce from the farm, and it will affect nutrition as well. And when it affects the nutrition, not just for the women, but also for the children. Yeah.
All right. So these are challenges.
Yes.
So now there is COP29, where countries go together to negotiate ways in which their countries are responding and what they need to also adapt to climate change and to also mitigate climate change. Now, looking at all this myriad of challenges that women face in climate-related disasters,
Yeah.
what are those ways? How can women adapt to? I mean, what are the challenges women face in adapting to those challenges, and how can COP29 address these issues?
One of the basic challenge I would say is their vulnerability. At any point in time, women are always vulnerable, and their vulnerability always spans up from either the society places them in a level of vulnerability, and also where they find themselves. For example, when you look at the aspect of social norms in some societies, like in the northern parts of Nigeria, there are some restrictions that has to do with women. Women don't participate in some activities. They don't also participate in some decision making. So they don't even participate in, they don't even have opportunities for representation. They don't have opportunities for participation or belonging to a group or committees like that. So when women are faced with this kind of vulnerabilities, in most cases also they lack access to some resources. You discover that in some cultures, they say women do not own lands. So if they don't own lands, even when they are farming, they farm on their husband's lands. And some of them, they borrow lands to farm, or they hire lands to farm.
Okay.
Yes, they don't own farms. They have limited access to resources actually. That is already a state of vulnerability for them. And as a result, it places them on the place of exploitation, abuse, and what have you. Even when they come to seek aid, when there is any humanitarian assistance, for example, when they go to seek for aid, you discover that in most cases they are being exploited. Yes.
Okay, so there will be COP29 in November.
Yeah.
How can this challenge be addressed?
One of the key things that should be done in this COP29, there should be opportunities for women delegations. Let there be opportunities for women delegations. We have experienced women leaders, and we also have women who are also emerging that have a little basic knowledge about climate change. If there will be opportunity for women delegations, opportunity for women to be represented in high places of discourse, I think they will be able to bring in their specific needs, take their needs into account, because they said it is only the person that wears a shoe that knows where the shoe pinches most. And to me, I feel if women are brought to the table, you can't make decisions about me when I am not there to speak about myself.
Yeah, that brings me to the next point, the next question I want to ask. How can we ensure female representation in climate decision-making processes?
Yeah. So let's just say, let's start from integration, integrating aspects of gender, especially that has to do with the female gender, into climate change policies and programming as well. Currently in Nigeria, we have climate change policy, but it is just now, I'm telling you, it is just now that effort is being made to integrate the aspect of gender into the climate change policy. Some states don't even have climate change policies. So we have the national policy, for example, but we don't, the aspects of gender is silent on it. It's silent in those policies. So if we can start from there, all programming, designing, planning, we should bring into consideration the aspect of gender. How do we How do we bring this into play? How do we look at also the age segregation? We also look at inclusivity that has to do with the people with disability, the gender, looking at the male gender, looking at the female gender. We talked initially, I said from the beginning, that climate change impacts men and women differently. So when we look at it like that, we now try as much as possible to either mainstream or integrate this aspect of gender into the climate change policy, and deliberately ensure that not just in integrating it, ensure that these policies are effective, they're being implemented. So I think one of the things that should be achieved in this COP29, as well as the aspect of women representation, is to ensure that women are given a quota, for example. Now in Nigeria, we have women are actually asking for just 35% affirmation. So if women are asking for 35, okay, let's look at the aspect of quota. Let's say 30% or 40 or 50% quota should be delegated to women. I take example from Adamawa State, for example. Adamawa State government made a decision at the last local government election. They made a decision, and the governor gave an order, I will call it an order, that all vice chairmen of the entire 21 local government must be female. So that stance is non-contestable. So if that position also is being placed for women, I think women representation in either any high place of discourse, like even in the COP29, would be great.
All right. You made mention of the Adamawa as an example where women are deputized or are vice chairman of local government.
Yeah.
I would like to actually ask for that, if that is enough for women. Can't women lead and men deputize them?
Definitely. I think to us, we feel it is a step ahead. Why? Because before, a woman hardly gets even councillorship. Yeah. A woman, you discover that among how many councillors, you just hear maybe 1 or 2 councillors. That is among like 50 something. But to us, we feel this is a step ahead for us, the women. And it is just the beginning. The next one we'll have women leading. Yeah.
That's okay. Lastly, I would like to ask because you said women need to be given opportunity to be represented in climate decision-making processes. And I would like to ask, what are the examples of some of the women-led initiatives that are really scaled, that can be seen as some of the things that women can do to make sure that, yes, they have done this thing before, and when we give them opportunity, a higher platform, they would impact and make actionable change?
There's this women-led organizations / women rights organizations in disaster risk reduction and climate change, which is here in Nigeria, is being facilitated and led by UN Women and UNDP. Okay. And I know them, they actually advocate for gender mainstreaming into disaster programming, into climate change programming. They also try as much as possible to do some interventions in local communities where they can amplify voices of women when it comes to aspects of disaster. I think there's another one, African Women Development Fund. This one is basically in Africa, though I don't have much interaction or contact with them, but I've known this one also exists here in Africa. Like the women-led, I told you, and the women rights, my organization is part of it. Okay. Yes, Against All Odds Foundation is actually part of those women-led and women rights organizations in disaster risk and climate change.
Okay. Yeah. It's a pleasure to have you on Climate Connect podcast. Is there something else you would like to also share with our audience or share with the general public?
Okay, I will say we've talked a lot about women's representation. We've also talked much on women's impact of climate change on women. I will also say that let's try as much as possible to cascade some of these informations, like some of our women in the local communities they lack information about climate change. They lack information, I mentioned, they lack access to resources and even technology. When you talk about climate change, you cannot talk about it without mentioning aspect of technology. Things like solar initiatives, these are all technologies. Some of them in the communities, they don't know about it. When we went to the communities last year to implement some activities on climate change, some of them were actually hearing about it for the very first time. They don't even know that some of the activities they do daily, all these human activities that they do contribute to climate change. They don't know. So they need to be made aware. And they need to, or some of them are actually doing great and amazing things in the community, but their voices are not being heard. So if we can, that is why I said initially, if we can bring up well-experienced women leaders on climate change and also bring up emerging women, give them opportunities also for mentorship, give them opportunities to network, yeah, we can give them opportunities like this COP29, for example. It's a very good grant that we can give women opportunities to network and mentor one another. Yeah, then that also will help them to come up, and they have a lot of stories to tell about climate change and how it impacts their communities.
All right. Thank you very much, Mrs. Sarah Jackson.
Yeah.
We really appreciate your presence on our podcast.
Thank you so much.
All right. That's where we end this edition of the podcast. Next week is another day, and we'll be here for another beautiful edition. Do keep it with us. But before you leave, please subscribe and share this video with your network. Love you.